Mr. Freeze isn't just a villain in Batman the Animated Series, he's an integral part of its identity, sewn into the show's DNA as tightly as the Art Deco skyline and Shirley Walker's score. Heart of Ice's debut episode set the tone for what Batman the Animated Series could be. A single episode transformed a forgotten Silver Age punchline into a tragic icon, and in doing so, earned a Daytime Emmy for Outstanding Writing and Animation. This partly explains why Victor Freeze wasn't just another rogue cycling in and out. He was a character they dusted off, reshaped, and given a soul. And understandably, they guarded him. They didn't want Freeze dragged out for a quick rematch or a Villain of the Week cameo. If he was gonna come back, it had to matter. And that's why years went by without a second appearance, a rarity in a show where the Joker practically had a punch card. Freeze wouldn't return until their final run when the show was rebranded to The Adventures of Batman and Robin in the episode Deep Freeze. Deep Freeze didn't give Victor peace though. It was intended to be a tragic ending to his story. Freeze was reunited with his wife Nora, but only through glass and cold machinery, drifting out to sea with her life slipping away and no rescue in sight. The implication of the ending was that Nora had perished because Victor had chosen to stop the only person that could potentially save her, a madman who was going to bring about a new ice age. And then, just when everyone thought Freeze's story was over, the Warner Brothers home video executives came knocking. And this leads me to the story of how the direct-to-video movie Batman and Mr. Freeze Subzero came to be. When Batman the Animated Series concluded, the remaining core team members were racing ahead to develop Superman the Animated Series and later the new Batman adventures. Meanwhile, series director Boyd Kirkland intended to go his own way and make a Batman feature film. He had a clause in his contract giving him full creative control over any project of his choosing, and so he tapped writer Randy Rogel to pull together a dramatic story involving Bane returning to Gotham stronger than ever before, and maybe too strong for Batman to deal with alone. At the same time, the romance between Dick Grayson and Barbara Gordon would blossom and the pair would reveal their secret identities to each other. With the combined might of the Bat family, Batman would overcome Bane and a new day would dawn in Gotham City. Which all sounds really cool, sort of like a more serious attempt at adapting the comic book storyline Nightfall, but the executives at Warner Brothers Home Video, who had commissioned the project, had other ideas in mind. They wanted this animated film to be released alongside their upcoming blockbuster Batman and Robin, and when Arnold Schwarzenegger, then the highest paid actor in Hollywood, was cast as Mr. Freeze, Rogel and Kirkland were told to pivot and tell a Mr. Freeze story instead. And so they set out to finally give the tragic scientist his piece, and I think that Subzero really demonstrates a different take on the tragedy of Mr. Freeze. For Kirkland and Rogel, Mr. Freeze wasn't a monster waiting for the next twist of the metaphorical knife. He was a grieving husband whose humanity was the entire point. While Paul Dini, Alan Burnett, Bruce Timm and Kevin Altieri treated Freeze as a tragic figure who would never achieve happiness, Kirkland and Rogel had a more humane vision. In Subzero, Nora is revealed to be alive, still floating in her tank, and by the film's end she is restored to full health by Bruce Wayne. What's more, in the original proposed ending, Mr. Freeze would also be cured by Wayne and gladly do his time in prison in penance. However, that would have been too definitive an ending for such an important character, especially if Batman and Robin was successful, and as such the film ends with the tragedy of the Freeze family thawing. Nora still got her life back, but Mr. Freeze would be forever separated from her, wandering the Arctic for the rest of his life. Rogel even had thoughts for a sequel that never happened, a story where Nora was alive but still physically unreachable, a romance divided by temperature, or as he put it, a fish and a bird, who can see each other through the glass but never share the same world. That was the emotional architecture Kirkland and Rogel believed in. And to be clear, while this film was made by a separate unit without the involvement of the core BTAS team, it was still intended to be part of the same continuity, picking up where Deep Freeze had ended, although on a significantly more upbeat note. Burnett and Dini were only listed as script consultants, and both admit to barely touching the film. Burnett says he read it once, gave some notes and moved on. I'm told that Dini didn't love the idea of Nora being revived, but he gave his approval because these people were his friends and he didn't want to trample on their passion project. Ultimately, Subzero took the character of Mr. Freeze and tried to heal his wounds. It's definitely a more humane approach to the character, and more optimistic, perhaps in part to Kirkland's Mormon faith. In essays he wrote on Mormon theology, Kirkland explored ideas about the interplay between the spirit and flesh, morality and redemption, and the enduring significance of love across impossible divides. It's easy to see echoes of this in Subzero. Kirkland wanted Freeze to remain recognisably human, to retain his moral complexity, and to have a love for Nora that persisted despite circumstances that made their union physically impossible. His vision prioritised emotional truth over spectacle, favouring bittersweet hope over outright tragedy. In other words, even in the world of supervillains and high-tech crime, Kirkland's Freeze was a deeply human figure, someone for whom the boundaries between life, love and the eternal were never simple. While Kirkland approached Mr. Freeze through the lens of enduring love and moral transcendence, you could argue that Dini took a more secular approach. His Freeze is defined by circumstance and consequence. Tragic, human, and bound by the limits of his world. You could also argue that the extreme path they went down in the new Batman adventures, where Freeze becomes a head in a jar on mechanized spider legs, was a colossal nope in response to Kirkland's vision of a man striving to reunite with his wife. Where Kirkland emphasized eternal devotion and moral complexity, Dini and Timm emphasized narrative closure and emotional stakes, letting the character's humanity emerge through loss and consequence rather than spiritual transcendence. Whether that works for you or not will be a matter of personal taste, but I tend to lean towards Paul Dini's original take, a gothic horror featuring a zombie snowman driven by despair, but you do you. But you know what? I think I've kind of stumbled upon the key underlying message of this film. It's all about the power of love. There are so many forms of love on display. Mr. Freeze's parental love for the little family he built for himself in the Arctic, with his pet polar bears and adopted son Kunak. There's also his love for Nora, which is the kind of love that drives a man to extremes. Freeze's devotion to Nora motivates both his greatest acts of genius, pushing the boundaries of cryogenics, as well as his darkest transgressions. He murders a submarine crew after they breached his peace, and comes close to killing Barbara Gordon, all in the name of preserving and reclaiming the woman he loves. It's dangerous, obsessive, but achingly human, a reflection of Kirkland's fascination with love as a force that transcends morality, circumstance, and even life and death. And it's not limited to the villains either. There's a tenderness between Dick Grayson and Barbara Gordon that hints at the possibility of connection without destruction and murder. They are a young couple just at the start of their relationship, with a world of possibilities ahead of them. Meanwhile, Batman's compassionate love for his fellow man guides his choices. Note how he doesn't attack Freeze, even when he learns of his intentions for Barbara. He tries to defuse the situation. He sees the potential for good in people, even when they fall into darkness, and he feels a duty to protect them from harm, sometimes at great personal cost. It's a love that manifests as sacrifice and vigilance. He endures isolation, physical pain, and emotional burden because he believes that every life matters and that justice and safety are worth the personal toll. Unlike Victor Freeze, whose love is obsessive and personal, Batman's love is measured and ethical. It drives him to act, but it doesn't blind him to consequences. He knows what it's like to lose someone you love. It's actually happened to him a few times. He understands how it feels to be willing to do anything to hold on, but he takes that negative energy and turns it into something more positive. When he arrives at Freeze's oil rig base, there's no anger or righteous vengeance. All he wants to do is save everyone. Save Barbara from being killed, save Nora, and save Freeze from himself. There's some glorious imagery in the final act of the film when the oil rig bursts into flames. Sure, heat is the opposite of cold and is particularly deadly to Freeze, so it makes an appropriate threat, but given Kirkland's faith, it's hard not to read it as the fires of hell surrounding the wicked. Note that the only person that doesn't love anyone, the greedy Dr. Gregory Belson, is consumed by the flames after he betrays Freeze. Freeze also falls into the burning waters, but it's the love from his polar bears that drags him to safety. I think it's worth pointing out that when he failed, Freeze entrusted Nora's safety to Batman. While they may be on opposite sides during this conflict, Freeze knows that Batman can be trusted, and ultimately Batman saves Nora's life. As Bruce Wayne, he pays for her treatment, presumably without stealing anyone's organs, and gives her a new lease on life. And this ending, I think, perfectly encapsulates Kirkland and Rogel's different approach to Mr. Freeze. In Heart of Ice, the story closes on a heartbreaking image. Mr. Freeze alone in his cell, weeping as he whispers apologies to his dead wife via a snow globe. That image crystallizes everything about Dini's take on Mr. Freeze, his grief, his obsession, and above all, his humanity. Subzero takes that same emotional core and inverts it, reflecting Kirkland and Rogel's more hopeful version. Freeze is still separated from Nora, still trapped in his icy exile, but now he watches from the outside. On a news broadcast, he sees that Nora has been revived. The tears return, but this time they are tears of joy. It's the same man with the same grief, but with a momentary reprieve. It's a subtle nod to hope that life can, in small ways, bend towards mercy. Boyd Kirkland and Randy Rogel emphasised the sustaining power of love, letting it transform grief into bittersweet triumph. Paul Dini, by contrast, kept Freeze's humanity tethered to tragedy, a reminder of the inexorable consequences of obsession. Both of these approaches honour his love for Nora, but one lets it bloom, however fleetingly, and the other keeps it locked in winter's unyielding grip. Okay, that's it for this essay. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell all your friends about me. You know how YouTube works. If you really liked the video and feel like tossing a buck or two my way, please consider using the thanks button, because every little helps. And if you have really enjoyed my work, you might want to pick up a copy of my book, Rogues Gallery. It features 22 essays on villains from Batman the Animated Series. There's a beautiful cover by Batman the Animated Series background artist John Calmette, a foreword by director Dan Reber, and a moving segment from the late Kevin Conroy sharing his thoughts on life, love, and loss. Plus, an exclusive essay on the Condiment King that will never be made into a video. Rogues Gallery is available worldwide on Amazon, both digitally and in softcover. Finally, channel memberships are just $1.99 a month and give you early access to my essays, custom emojis, and your name featured on my members end screen, which has been rolling for a little while now. Huge thanks to everyone who's already part of this. You've helped to make these videos possible. If you want to see your name up here too, join the channel now. Next time, I'll be back on Friday with a video that follows up on this essay to talk about the divisive episode of the new Batman adventures that undid all of Mr. Freeze's progress. Yes, I'll be talking about Cold Comfort. And next Monday I'll conclude my series of videos on Mr. Freeze by discussing his one chance at redemption and how it was brutally ripped away from him. It's his final appearance in the DC Animated Universe, the Batman Beyond episode, Meltdown. Hope to see you then.